Hello, I'm Evaleen, founder and director of Awesome Training. So I wanted to show people how to recognize if something is neuro-affirming or not. It can be really difficult. It can be really hard because it is presented to you as something that's really positive and really good and really helpful. And a lot of us have grown up with the idea of good and bad behavior and the idea that this is what all people should do and this is what we do in society and all of these kind of things. So all of these impact, I suppose, how we absorb and interpret information. So it can be really, really difficult. It took me a long time to actually, I suppose, figure it all out. So I just wanted to share some of that with you today. I'm going to take an example because I need an example because concrete examples are always good. And I'm going to talk through that. So I'm just going to show you a resource that I've chosen from the NCSE website, which is our an educational website for special educational website in Ireland. And this is about behaviour contracts, and these are used widely in schools. I've taught in lots of schools, and it's used with lots of kids, kind of common classroom management. And this one then is specifically for autistic kids or kids with special needs. So here we see a picture of a person saying, "Good behaviour isn't magic, it's a skill, just like anything else." So here we have the first problem, because behavior really isn't a skill. Behavior is a way of communicating. That's one way we can look at it. Or it's a way of reflecting what's going on in our environment. So what goes on in our environment affects how we feel, and then we express that in our behavior. So that's why behavior is a communication, and it's also a reflection of our environment. So I think by reducing behavior to a skill implies that autistic kids just need to learn how to behave themselves. It's just a skill. So this isn't neuro-affirming, and it's not trauma-informed, because there are tons of reasons why people behave in certain ways. And it's not really in line with current scientific research or what we know about how human beings work and neuroscience and all of that. So just let's have a look at what's next. So that's just the introduction, and there's obviously contents. So a behaviour contract is a written agreement between a child or young person and a parent. It spells out what rules a child or young person needs to follow, and therefore what behaviour is expected from him or her. I mean, and it sounds fine. Yeah, I mean, don't children have to follow rules? Don't children have to? And this is what's tricky, because it looks quite reasonable. It outlines behaviour that is acceptable and unacceptable. So that's just other words for good and bad. And I grew up, and I'm sure many of us did, with some behaviour is good and some behaviour is bad. And I remember a long time ago someone saying to me, "There's no such thing as bold children." And I was like, what? But didn't we all grow up with that idea that we did bold things and that we were bold? And it took me some time to unravel it. And there is no such thing as bold children. People do things for lots of reasons. So then it says it outlines behavior that's acceptable and unacceptable, as well as the consequences and rewards involved. Now, kids do well when they can. Kids want to please people around us. They want to have good relationships with people. They don't want to be upsetting people and doing things they already know aren't acceptable as such. So it's more a question of, well, why is the child not doing these things? And when we kind of talk about rewards and consequences, which in terms of behaviour contracts are punishments, consequences equals punishments, how is this giving the child any kind of understanding? How is it looking at all the reasons behind behaviours? It's oversimplifying. It's just saying, well, if we tell a child what's good and bad, what's acceptable and unacceptable, they'll just do it. But I'm an adult and I know what's good and bad for me, and I know what's acceptable and unacceptable, and I know what I should do, whether that's exercising every day, taking time for myself, reading a book, whatever. And sometimes I just don't do it. So simply knowing what the expected behavior is doesn't mean I'll do it. And then this is why I suppose positive behavior support starts using rewards and punishment. Rewarding people for doing the thing that someone else wants them to do. And there's a problem straight away, isn't it? Rewarding someone for doing something that someone else wants them to do. Is that a message we should be sending to children? Is it? What kind of lives are we setting them up for if we're teaching them to do something that someone else wants them to do? So, so it looks harmless. It looks like good parenting and a reasonable expectation from any child. But if we look a little bit further at the behaviour contract, on the surface, it looks like the child is involved as well. But in reality, these are usually imposed on kids by adults. You'll notice the use of expected behaviour, and that is, of course, the adult's expectation, and also based on non-disabled or non-autistic expectations. We can't have the same expectations for everybody because everybody's different. And we need to have different expectations for different people. So when we reduce behaviour, again, as I said, to acceptable and unacceptable, we're saying some behaviour is good and some behaviour is bad. And this is what we've grown up with. And I'm not saying that children don't do things that they shouldn't, or they don't do things that hurt themselves or others, just to be very clear on that. I'm just pointing out this isn't the right approach. I'm saying that kids have a very valid reason behind every action. So this contract also implies that children are in full control of their behaviour. But of course, as humans, we know that to be untrue. Have you ever done something and going, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I said that. I wasn't thinking. I just did it. We're not in control. We're not in full control of our actions as adults. So why would we be expecting this from children who are still developing? You know, as I said, did you ever eat something you know you shouldn't? Or do something dishonest and hoping no one will find out? Or did you lose patience because you were stressed? You know, have you done something that you've had to apologize for later? We're not in full control all the time for a lot of reasons. So we do these things frequently, and it's hard for us to stay in control and stop ourselves from reacting to others. So why would we put these expectations on a child who's still developing their ability to respond, to regulate their emotions, and to understand the world around them? So this behaviour contract is written in agreement between a child or a young person or a parent. It spells out the rules that a child or young person needs to follow, and therefore what behaviour is expected from him or her. It outlines behaviour that's acceptable and unacceptable, as well as the consequences and the rewards involved. Schools sometimes develop behaviour contracts between students, parents, teachers to improve behaviour. When developing behaviour contracts, children and young people select and negotiate rules and rewards. Strategy, therefore, will be effective with children and young people who can understand these concepts. How much power does a child have in a negotiation with an adult? Like realistically, generally in our society, where we don't treat children as equals. So how much negotiation power does a child really have? And we can't just say that they have the power and it makes it all look lovely. We have to be realistic. Typically, behaviour contracts are designed to work on increasing positive behaviours. This is where it is definitely not neuro-affirming, such as socially interacting with people, listening to others, doing homework, or helping out at home. Now, this is where it gets quite problematic straight away. I'm only on page 2. Increasing positive behaviors. So if someone decides it's a positive behavior that a child who feels safer in their own company, this is why lots of autistic kids isolate themselves, because it's safer. It's their way of coping, the environment. It's the way of protecting themselves from negative feedback that they get from people in their social world. And they're doing that, and that's not acceptable behavior. To protect yourself and put your own needs first and to mind your little autistic self is unacceptable, because a positive behavior is when you interact with people. So a neuro-affirming way would be to look at, why is the child not interacting with people? What way are people responding to them? How much understanding do people in the child's environment have about them, their neurology, their stimming, their way of communicating, their sensory profile? And then you'd address that and then see if those changes happened. You'd also take a trauma-informed approach and go, is this child traumatized by their social environment? How high is their anxiety? How difficult is it for them to interact with people when they don't feel safe around them? That's neuro-affirming. Simply saying, here's what we expect, you need to do it, and we'll reward you for doing it, is highly problematic. Listening to others kind of implies that the child isn't listening, and this happens to autistic kids a lot, doesn't it? We are listening. Often autistic kids are fully engaged in what's going on around them. They just don't look like they are to other people. So here there's a mismatch. This is where our double empathy problem comes in, where often people think we're not listening when we are. So this is just teaching kids to look like they're listening, rather than actually understanding in a neuro-affirming way that autistic kids often look different. Their listening looks different. Doing homework, of course, there's an expectation on all children to do homework, but all children don't come home from school completely burnt out, completely out of spoons, needing a whole lot of downtime and recovery time, because the school experience is so demanding on them. And no wonder it is, with all these people trying to get them to interact. Imagine what it's like to be in school all day and people not understanding you, misinterpreting your actions, misinterpreting your questions, your way of communicating, not understanding your anxiety, trying to teach you social skills, being bullied, being excluded, all of that. Never mind the bright lights and the noise, all of that too. And then coming home to do your homework. So this is where we have to be neuro-affirming, and we have to actually understand the autistic child's experience. And the only way we can do that is listen to autistics and ask, what was your experience? What is your experience? A child who's absolutely overwhelmed and burnt out and needs downtime then has to do their homework because they signed a contract and negotiated it with the adults. And if they don't, there's going to be consequences. Want to let people down. They might even get a punishment, might not get TV time or scrolling time or game time or kicking a ball around the place time or whatever is their favorite thing. And that's terrible, isn't it? And what happens if they do the homework? We then reward them. So we reward a child who's completely overwhelmed, burnt out, really just doesn't have the capacity to do the homework, which is why they're saying they won't do their homework, or can't do the homework. But they pull on their last reserves, put themselves under huge stress and do the homework because it's expected of them. And then people think, oh, the rewards work. Sure, it's harmless, it's great, it's motivating them. Is it? Or is it that the child has no choice here, really? Choice is do my homework, put myself under stress and do my homework, or don't do my homework and get in trouble and get everyone around me feeling bad. And I know I'll have let them down. I'm going to feel even worse about myself. Where's the choice in that? Where's the choice? And that's what a lot of positive reinforcement does. It look on the outside, ooh, rewards are working. On the inside, it's teaching the child, I have no choice. I have no power. And then we wonder how we can teach autistic children to advocate. Where would you start? How can you possibly advocate in this scenario? Because when you don't fulfill your side of the contract, there are consequences. If you try to explain why you can't, why you're not following the rules, and how easy is it for a child to explain? I'm completely burnt out. My mental health isn't good. I was really anxious at school today. Almost had a meltdown. I'm actually teetering on the border of burnout. A child doesn't have that language, probably not even that awareness. They just know they feel bad or they're tired a lot of the time. So, as well as being forced to interact with people that they feel uncomfortable around instead of educating people around them, and being forced to look like they're listening and then doing the homework, they also then might have to help out at home. Some kids are just so worn out, they can't, they don't have the energy. And when I say energy, I don't mean like to move about. I mean the energy it takes cognitively, the executive function it takes to plan a task, do a task, think about it, think about all the things that will happen if you don't do it. That's really demanding. So even with this, we can start to see already that this is really problematic, isn't it? Like really problematic. And that's why we need to start looking at things from a neuro-affirming lens. And we need to understand what neuro-affirming is, because I've seen stuff like this being called neuro-affirming. And it's really important that you're able to tell the difference between something that is pretending to be supportive and neuro-affirming and something that is obviously not. So then it says, when writing a contract, it's important to have your child involved from the beginning. Involved, sitting next to you. This enables your child to plan and talk to you about the contract as you're writing it. Your child therefore sees the contract as fair. Do they? Do they? Would you think this is fair if you were that little kid? Would you? Would you understand the implications of this contract on you 10 weeks down the line, or a year down the line, or 3 days down the line? Would you? Have they been fully explained to you that this is going to use up all the energy you have? It's going to increase your stress levels, it's going to increase your anxiety, it's going to leave you running on empty and operating under high stress. Is that in the contract? Involving your child from the beginning also fosters open communication. Does it? Does it though? Because where is the child's option to say, I don't want to do this contract at all? I mean, you don't have to sign a contract. There should be a choice there. There should be an opt-out. Where's their cooling off period? And choice making. Again, this pretend choice. Would you like to do the thing and put yourself under pressure? Or would you like to not do the thing and get in trouble? Ooh, which will I choose? How about neither? And actually offer real choice, not pretend choice. This sense of empowerment will support your child to feel better about him or herself. Now, this sentence here is kind of troubling me, because it's just saying that all this stuff will empower the child and it will help them to feel better about themselves. Now, there's a lot of talk of evidence-based. Where's the evidence that children who have been subjected to these kind of things felt better about themselves? Because the only way we could know that is if we actually ask the child. The only way we can do that is by researching autistics who have actually had this stuff imposed on them. And the problem is, we don't. It doesn't exist. So why is this sentence here claiming that autistics feel better when this stuff is done to them? when no one asked autistics. That's kind of problematic, isn't it? Sounds like someone is just making a broad statement about us without actually including us or asking us about it. Then there's another claim. It will also promote independence. Will it? Teaching a child, whoops, teaching a child that they must do the expected behavior at all costs to them, to put the needs of other people ahead of theirs, is going to teach them independence? Well, if you ask autistics how we learn things, we learn that we have learned to people please, and it didn't make us independent at all. It actually made us doubt ourselves and our own abilities, lack confidence, have low self-esteem, teach us to put other people's needs ahead of our own, to become reliant on other people to tell us who we are, what to do, how we feel, what to think, end up in abusive relationships. So I think this kind of wild statements are very unscientific, to say the very least. And what it really does is promotes accountability for his own behavior. Now, I don't know how accountable a stressed, overwhelmed child can be for the way they act, to be honest. So I'm going to leave it at there today, and we'll come back and we'll revisit this and we'll go through some more. So I hope you found that helpful. Let me know in the comments and we'll continue our little journey to understanding what neuro-affirming really means.